It is one of the most secure structures in the world. It safeguards the vast wealth of the United States, and its name is synonymous with one of the most precious commodities in the history of the world: gold. But behind this building's stone exterior are secrets. Secrets so outrageous.
Is there any gold in Fort Knox? We just don't know.
So controversial.
In my opinion, there's no such thing as an impregnable vault.
So potentially dangerous.
You cannot get answers because the secret history would explode the market.
That they must be kept hidden from the public.
If I tell you about Fort Knox, it's gonna blow your socks off.
There are those who believe in the existence of a book. A book that contains the most highly guarded secrets of the United States of America. A book whose very existence is known to only a select few. But if such a book exists, what would it contain? Secret histories? Secret plans? Secret lies? Does there really exist America's Book of Secrets? July 2007, major banking institutions across America announce a series of financial setbacks. It is the first public indication of an economic crisis, one that will hurl the United States and Europe into the worst financial recession since the 1930s. Over the next 4 years, the price of gold skyrockets to nearly $2,000 an ounce, its highest price in recorded history. Gold's unprecedented value draws attention to the U.S. government's secret holdings of the precious metal.
For far too long, the United States government has been less than transparent in releasing information relating to its gold holdings. Not surprisingly, this secrecy has given rise to a number of theories about the gold at Fort Knox, and the government owes it to the people to provide them with the details of these holdings.
America's gold reserves are held in 4 U.S. Mint depositories: Denver, West Point, New York's Federal Reserve, and the largest, Fort Knox. The nature and extent of these reserves are as secret as they are secure.
You are more likely to obtain from the United States government the blueprints for the construction of a nuclear weapon than you are to obtain any accurate, detailed accounting of the disposition of the United States gold reserve and the gold reserve of other Western nations.
Only a presidential order can open the Fort Knox vault, and no audit of the contents of the vault has been conducted since 1953.
Certainly there's evidence that the government is hiding something.
By law, the U.S. Treasury operates under the direct orders and supervision of the President. And not only does the Treasury print money, collect taxes, and enforce trade agreements, it also oversees America's most precious commodity, its gold.
Militaries will pack their pilot survival kits with gold coins, not with paper currency, because gold is the universal money, and its value determines the value of government currencies. Gold's value also profoundly influences interest rates and the price of government bonds. This is the primary reason why governments have always tried to control the price of gold. The gold price is a determinant of the value of all capital, labor, goods, and services in the world. There is nothing else.
The origin of America's gold reserves dates back to 1933, when President Franklin Delano Roosevelt outlawed the private ownership of gold by U.S. citizens in an effort to jumpstart the economy during the Great Depression.
In 1933, America nationalized its gold. In essence, it stole it from the American people.
Roosevelt realized that the only way in order to bring the country out of that depression was for the federal government to control the money.
Under the watchful eye of federal marshals, citizens were required to turn in their gold coins, bullion, and even gold paper certificates at the then current exchange rate of $20.67 per troy ounce. Failure to comply was punishable by heavy fines and up to 10 years in prison. Almost overnight, U.S. gold reserves swelled to 5,000 tons, melted into 368,000 uniform bars, each weighing 27.5 pounds. 1 year later, Roosevelt raised the new fixed price for U.S. gold to $35 an ounce.
Once he acquired all the gold in the country, he doubled its value. You can do that when you own it all.
The difference is the government had the profit, not the individual people. And that was the way that the New Deal attempted to jumpstart the economy.
In less than 24 months, Franklin Roosevelt had consolidated the single greatest concentration of wealth in modern history. And to store it, he constructed the country's strongest fortress, Fort Knox.
In the 1930s, we were concerned about rumblings of war in Europe, and the federal government was concerned about our gold being stored in New York and Philadelphia, which are both coastal locations and subject to attack. Roosevelt decided to build a vault to put the gold in, and it had to be a reasonable distance away from the Atlantic coast.
Not only was Roosevelt's choice of location far from the ocean, it stood adjacent to the Fort Knox military base. And while the depository remains under the sole control of the U.S. Treasury, the Army's 10,000 soldiers and M1 tanks still provide a clear deterrent to anyone with designs on America's gold.
There's a military unit at Fort Knox at all time responsible if any attack was made on the gold vault.
Secret guards, a top-secret vault, and a wall of silence surrounding the true contents of Fort Knox have led some to speculate that Roosevelt's choice of location might be linked to one of Kentucky's more colorful legends.
There's a story that the Founding Fathers actually thought during the Revolutionary period that the United States Treasury needed to be hidden somewhere from the British. And Kentucky seemed to be a very likely place because it was still part of Virginia at that time.
George Washington would have realized that there was no fortification available during that time that you could safeguard such a treasury. But one thing that they did have was Kentucky, the wilderness of Kentucky, and caves in abundance.
Regional folklore has long held that the deep caves surrounding Fort Knox were an ideal place for pirates and others to stash their precious valuables.
The pirate legends do get some credence because through the years there have been pieces of gold and silver found in central Kentucky.
But could a cave like this really have served as the first gold depository of the United States? Some believe the answer is yes. And for proof, they point to a colonial Englishman named Jonathan Swift, a mysterious associate of General George Washington, who owned extensive land in Kentucky. Swift may also have served as the model for one of the most famous pirates in literature.
When Robert Louis Stevenson wrote the famous Treasure Island, he knew about the legend of Jonathan Swift, and many people think that he actually did take that legend and create Long John Silver. If you look at the map that was drawn for the book, it looks like the United States of America. And then if you look where X marks the spot where the treasure is, it looked geographically where it would have been Kentucky.
Using maps and letters of the era, author Robert Prather suggests that gold may have been smuggled in salt barrels to secret caves on tracts of land owned by Swift, land located only miles from the current gold depository.
I think it's a possibility that the gold vault was built where it is due to events of the late 18th century. The fact that Jonathan Swift owned this property, which was nearly in the backyard of the bullion depository, the fact that we're not allowed to know very much about the contents today perfectly demonstrates that secrecy has always been maximum when it comes to our national treasury.
Today, official Treasury records set the Fort Knox gold reserves at 147.3 million troy ounces, worth trillions of US dollars. More gold than the entire reserves of China, Japan, Switzerland, Russia, and Saudi Arabia combined.